Alright guys, so I'm going to show you how to make the sublimation tumblers. First I'm going to go through and show you all of the products that you need. So first of all, you're going to need sublimation tumblers. You can't just use a regular white tumbler. You're going to have to make sure that you buy ones that are coated so that it sticks to the cup. I will link some places of where you can buy tumblers at. And then you're going to need heat transfer tape. You can just get this on Amazon. This will not melt. You don't want to use just like regular Scotch tape. And that's what that looks like. And then I also have this dispenser. It just makes it a lot easier to pull the tape off instead of having to constantly be like picking at it and using your scissors to cut it. Okay. And then you're also going to need, you don't have to use this shrink wrap, but you can. I find that it's easiest. You can also use like painter's tape and, what's the other tape? I can't think of what it's called. It's like painter's tape, and you can just wrap the cup super tight. I've never done it that way just because the shrink wrap is the easiest way to do it for me personally. When you're doing cups, you'll also find that you will have issues with the edges not being tight enough. The most important thing with these cups is making sure that the pressure all around the cup is even and it's able to stick to the cup just right. That's pretty much the main problem people have when trying to do these cups, as well as the seam. So to prevent that, I buy these silicone bands. You can get these on Amazon. They're pretty much just like bracelets. I'm sure you've seen them before. So I'll show you here in a few minutes, but we are going to put that on the top and the bottom of the cup to make sure that it's super tight. Of course, you're going to need scissors for when you are cutting your paper. In another video, I will show you how to size these and print these off, but I already have these printed to go on the cup. You're also going to need a heat gun. These are fairly cheap, probably like under $20. I got this one on Amazon. You're gonna need this for your shrink wrap. If you're not doing the shrink wrap and just doing the tape, you're not gonna need one of these. Moving on to this oven. This one is a turbo convection oven. I would not recommend getting this one because I've had issues with like the buttons and stuff, so I would just get more of a basic one. As long as it goes up to 400 degrees, that's pretty much what you're gonna need. So when I set mine, I just make sure it's between 350 and 400. That works best for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and preheat it so that it's ready once we have the cup prepped and we can get the cup made. So another thing that you're also going to need that I forgot is you're gonna wanna buy one of these thermometers to go inside the oven, because even though it might say that it's a certain temperature, it's just better to check it with this thermometer. And I just kind of keep it right in the middle there, and I'll watch that thermometer, and once it's the temperature that I need, then I know I can put the cup in there. So the way that I set this one is, I made the mistake when I first bought it. I hit bake and set it to 400, and it just wasn't getting hot enough. So you do turbo convection, and then we're gonna set it to 400, and then I hit start. It takes a little bit to heat up, and you're also gonna need these gloves because these cups are gonna be insanely hot when you take them out of the oven, and you don't wanna burn yourself. So now I'm going to wrap this design onto this cup. This is probably the most tedious part of the whole thing, is just making sure that you get it perfectly on there, and you really don't want too much overlapping. So the way that I do it is I start by just kind of making sure that it's the right size. This I already know is going to be too long, and I'm going to need to trim it. Okay. So as you can see, it's just way too long and overlapping. So I'm just going to keep trimming it. Sometimes even if the dimensions say that it's right on the computer, it just prints out way too big. Alright, so in order to get like a perfect seam, you want to make sure that like it's touching perfectly right there. if you overlap, you're just gonna have a dark overlap like color right there. And then if you don't do it straight, you're just gonna have a big white gap. So it's just important to make sure that you are just getting it as perfect as you can. It's really difficult sometimes, but eventually you'll get your own flow down and be able to do it. All right, so now that I've got it cut as good as I possibly can, we're gonna go ahead and start taping it down. I'm kind of an over taper only because after a lot of trial and error, I want to make sure that it comes out right because it is expensive to waste these cups. And when you're doing this, just making sure that you're pulling everything super tight. So my first piece of tape, I usually just put it right there so that it's holding those two seams together. And then I just tape it straight down that seam right there. Okay, so now that I've got that seam taped, now I'm gonna tape around the top and the bottom. Still pulling super tight. And even if you do miss a little bit, that shrink wrap is going to pull it super tight too. All right, so typically after this point, if you're gonna use like the painter's tape, people just wrap the whole thing super tight with that. But I feel like this is a little bit quicker. So we're going to put the plastic wrap around it and then use the heat gun to make it super tight. So it starts tightening up, but you don't want to hold it in one spot too long where it starts to melt. But I always try to focus on the top as well as the seam and try to get out all the bubbles that you can. Then as you can see, it has really tightened up there around the cup. We're gonna wanna put these bands on. So I put these bands on around the top part here, just around where we put that tape, and this just helps to make sure that there's no like white spots. All right, and then now we're gonna put it in the oven, and I put it in there for 5 minutes, and I don't flip it halfway through or anything like that. I just keep it in there. And I like to lay them down. This oven is big enough where if you wanted to stand them up, you could, but I prefer to just lay them down in there, and I could typically do 2 or 3 in there. So I'm gonna set my timer for 5 minutes and just set it in the center. Like that. And then we will come back when it's done. Okay, so now that it's been in there for 5 minutes, we are going to take it out. This little tray came with my oven, so I always just use it to sit it on once I pull it out. And always use your heat protected gloves. And then I turn it off when I'm done with it. And an easy way to do this is if you could have like a bowl of like cold water, you could just toss it in there and then it wouldn't be hot to take the paper and stuff off. But for right now, I'm just gonna take it off while it's hot. And then I'm gonna cut it, just kind of give me a starting point to start ripping the paper off. So this one wasn't completely perfect. So as you can see, like right there, it might not have been tight enough, and I already knew it wasn't going to be completely perfect at the bottom just because the bottom wasn't cut great, but there it is. And it always just kind of depends on how perfect you either cut the paper, how tight it is. There's always little things that kind of go wrong with each cup. But eventually you'll get the hang of it, and it's easier if you're always kind of doing similar designs. So like if I were to continue to do this design, I'd learn like, okay, this is exactly how I need to do this to make sure that it's seamless and perfect. But overall, I'm happy with it. Another thing that I did want to say that we were talking about was when you buy these ovens and you put things in there for sublimation, you don't want to eat out of it because sublimation is putting gases and stuff in the air, and you also don't want to be using your oven that you have in your kitchen. So that is the process of making one of these cups, and I hope it helped.